When I'm not walking in the light that I've been called to be and I'm doing differently than who my faith has dictated I be, then there is no resolve.
Okay, and my next question has to do with faith and resilience. Was there a moment in your life when faith became a key element of your journey? If so, how did it guide your decisions and strengthen your resolve? And how has it shaped your approach to life's challenges?
My faith has driven most of my decision making. I have this innate ability to be convicted when my faith is not at the level that it should be. I have to dig deep and get back into a place of balance while we're talking about balance as it pertains to my faith, because I saw early on, and I felt the effects, but I did not understand until I was much older and really developing in my faith that my faith was in action from middle school all the way to now. And I have found that when I'm not upholding my faith to the best of my ability and I'm not walking in, and I don't mean the part of faith that faith without works is dead. I don't mean that part of faith. I mean faith in who I believe in and whose I am. And I find that when I'm not upholding that person, I'm not at my best. When I'm not walking in the light that I've been called to be and I'm doing differently than who my faith has dictated I be, then there is no resolve. So my faith has driven me. My faith has kept me, as the old people say, when I didn't want to be kept. And I realized at a pretty young age just how important my faith was in order for me to have the impact and the life that God, has promised me. So I'm one of those maybe few people who believe the scripture that without faith it's impossible to please God. Is not only that faith in action that I'm talking about the faith, the foundation of faith, the foundation of Jesus Christ, the foundation of, again, who I am and whose I am. I'm talking about that part of faith, just not the action part. My faith, who I believe in, what I believe, and why I believe it is the most important part of my success. And I realized without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm not even half of the way of the place that God is going to take me, and that's understood. But I wouldn't be half of who I am today if it wasn't for my faith. And so when you ask about resolve, without my faith, there would be no resolve for me.
That's good, Jawana. And you know what? I think about the mentorship spirit that God has given you, and I also think back in your early years of teaching and my being a teacher, watching you rise as a young teacher, and basically watching you walk into my footsteps when you were not in my classroom. It still was like you were there watching everything that I did because I saw you going in the same direction and carrying that spirit along into the classroom and realizing that these children sitting before you are our future. These are individuals, these are young lives that I'm here to not just teach math and science and social studies, but to help to shape their lives. And as a young teacher, I watched the children You were very young as a teacher. I almost couldn't tell you from the students. But over the years and even to now, some of those people are still in your life from seventh grade, from sixth and seventh grade. Some have been to service and served this nation in the army, and yet they still come back to see you. And many have insisted to their parents that they want to go to the church where uh, Miss Moria is, and they join the ministry and work under your ministry from children now up to adult leaders. I've watched it. So that's a journey that I even the young women that you mentor, all of them are not members of our church. Some of them don't even live in this area, from Texas to California to different places. And you are still have them in a girls group, mentoring, meeting with them virtually. That's ministry within itself. So my question is, what is it that actually inspired you to mentor women for over 25 years? And how has that experience enriched your life and your ministry? Because I'm seeing it, I'm watching it. I saw you spend your own money to go to the cabins to spend time with these young women. I read some of their replies to you about being feeling rejected, and you reached out to pull them into the journey and to sow into their lives. Tell me about that.
It's simple. I love that phrase that was coined. You can color with broken crayons. And I don't use that phrase with them, but that's my mission. My mission is for women to understand that no matter where you have come from, no matter what has happened, no matter what you have done and you wish you had done it differently, we all have those regrets at times, you can still succeed. And the message that Keith preached that resonates with me as it pertains to some of the women that I deal with is you can win with a bad hand. And you won with a bad hand. You won a lot of prizes. And so in so many of the little girls that I work with, I saw myself. Such great potential, and I follow so many of them on social media now, and I feel a sense of pride to feel like I had a hand in that. The women they've become, the mothers, some of them that I don't even talk to, but realizing that God allowed me to plant a seed in that greatness by no goodness of my own, but by the ministry that reeks from my pores. I just want all little girls and all broken women to know that they are indeed not judged by what they've done, but by what they overcome. And so the motto has been each one reach one. And so if there are people who help to build my future, who sowed seeds, of encouragement, financial seeds, seeds of experiences for things that you may not have been able to give me the opportunity to experience. And those collective investments, those collective things that people have done are what has built me to be the woman I am today. And so if I can just plant a seed, it may be through word, through deed, it may even just be through a prayer, then I feel like my work is done. And I had to learn that. That's a lesson that I had to learn from God, is that if I tell you to plant a seed, plant the seed. You don't have to water it. You don't have to fertilize it. You don't have to go back and see if it's growing. I'll do the rest. But just do what I've told you to do. So over a period of time, I have had to learn to pull back and just do what I've been called to do in each situation, and then stop it unless God says move further. So to answer your question, my motivation has been in so many of them. I saw myself. And it was ironic that you were saying that I went into teaching, because if you remember, I was a business major. And you would ask me all the time, did I want to teach? And you make such a phenomenal teacher. And if you remember, with a resounding no, I said up until the senior year of undergrad that I worked in the after school program just for some as a side hustle. And I began to work with some underprivileged children. And it was at that time that God spoke to my heart, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt what I've been called to do.
And I knew from the onstart that you were supposed to be a teacher, but that part of me did not want to push you into something that you weren't feeling yourself. And yes, you were a phenomenal teacher, and you still are. And I thank God for that. And I'm going to tie a couple of questions in together because I want to give you time to address these and however you want to do. How did you balance raising a family, building a career, and later leading ministry while staying true to your goals? That's one question. And add on to that, while you were doing all of that, raising two successful children, maintaining a 35-year marriage in an incredible situation, or having making incredible achievement, should I say. What has been your secret to nurturing a strong family while pursuing your goals? Going back to balancing the family, building your career, leading ministry, and at the same time, nurturing a strong family and having those goals met.
I would have to answer that by simply saying my faith. My faith has carried me. But in raising the children and working to sustain a healthy marriage, I put that first. It may not have always felt like it, because, many times we were out doing for others and doing other things together. But making sure that I put my family first. I will never forget when the baton was passed to us for the ministry. One of the first open meetings we had, I remember saying, so people would understand, so the membership would understand where I was, that I can't work as a mother and a leader, because at that time, I was giving up the career as a teacher, but I can't work untiringly for other people's children through good and bad situations and lose my own. So I needed them to know that my children came first. And I remember when we were youth leaders, one of the young people wanted to know why they were too young, go on a youth trip with us, but my baby got to go with us, and they were the same age. And I said, because she's a part of me and I've been called to lead. They didn't understand that, but I was not an advocate and would never have been an advocate for doing ministry and leaving my children behind. As an educator, I was trained on the curriculum instruction for the middle and the upper grades. But when my children got of school age, I went to get certified elementary, and I took them with me. So in ministry, I took them with me. In elementary, I got the degree and the certificate I needed to go with them. So in working to do ministry at all levels, because teaching is a ministry for those who treat it as such, it's a ministry, not a job. I wanted to be the best at what I was supposed to do in my career. I wanted to be the best at leading ministry or serving in ministry, but not at the extent of leaving my children or my husband behind. So I think the balance, working with the faith and the obedience, led all of us to where we are today, with them being successful, with them being in church every week, even though Tristan is in church every Sunday, despite of what life brings, he doesn't miss church. Kiana's away, and sometimes she's home for church, but she doesn't miss church where she's relocated. So it's been a journey, but it takes intentionality. And indeed, I've used intentional thinking, intentional planning, balance, and faith, all of those aspects working together to be successful and to raise successful children.
As we are getting ready to wrap up, look at this question for me, and it has to do with overcoming some of the odds. Looking back at what has been the most, let me ask the question, what has been the most difficult part of leading ministry, and how have you navigated uh, through those times that were tough and rough times? And we had a few of those.
Um, in doing ministry, I think the most difficult times are not events or eventful times, but probably more, especially with my nature of loving hard, of giving so much of myself. I think the most difficult times would come from being misunderstood or being misrepresented. Is almost as if people in ministry aren't human. So the probably for me again with the pretty easygoing personality is those times where you uh, have to continue to do ministry and love even after you've been hurt. When you have to keep ministering and keep being a light when others have represented your light in a manner that wasn't really indicative of who you are, and in the midst of having the emotions, the human emotions that go along with that, still having to do ministry, still having to love, still having to understand. That can be difficult depending on what season of life you're in. But I've learned that if you've really been called to it, then you can move forward even in those times. It hasn't ever been enough to make me want to give up or throw my hands up, and that's the part of it that confirms for me to know that I've been called to the office, that I have been elevated to in ministry. But those are the times that were most difficult, but I can't say that it has ever made me want to give up.
You know what, Joanna, I've noticed the walk that you have with the Lord, and uh, it amazes me, and I feel so proud that you have faced so many challenges and you have beat the odds of many of them. And there are so many women who are facing similar challenges. And what advice would you actually give them so that they could find hope and so that they can walk into the things of God and feel confident? Uh, what could you tell them that could inspire them to keep moving and keep going forth, because they can win with a bad hand?
Two things, probably more from a spiritual perspective, is obedience truly is better than sacrifice. Because I've learned that if God called you to something, you're going to be that person, whether by choice or by force. And God gives us free will. We're not people that He will force you to do anything, but circumstance will. And so many times I found in watching people's journey, I found that if they're not obedient, life will take them to a place such that they become obedient. I'm thinking about a young man who was in ministry just yesterday. And his words were, he's been out of church for probably about 10 years now, and he's a member of our church. And he said, I'm tired. He came to me after church and he said, I'm tired. I am tired of the life I've been living. Now, what God has for him, I'm not sure what God has for him, but I'm sure that life will bring you back to point A when you've jumped to point P and you weren't supposed to be there. It'll bring you back and God will allow you to do your first works over. So I would say that first of all, just striving for obedience to the best of your ability would be the first piece of advice. For women, I think finding out who you are and being confident in who you are. It's very difficult to feel like you're being an imposter on an assignment, that you have an assignment and you can't be your real authentic self. So, what I find with women is most women struggle because somewhere along the way, if it wasn't developed at an early age, or if life broke them, or if situations have happened that they have encountered that caused them to lack in self worth, or lack in the knowledge needed to fulfill a certain assignment, the best advice I could give is find out who you are. And you say that's not so easy. It is easy. It's being intentional about therapy, and that's we're dealing with spiritual warfare in the ministry now. And I find that so much of what we endure comes from the spirit world. And so we grew up with being told Jesus is all you need. I do know that a foundation in Jesus and who he is, and him, the blood of Jesus and the power and all of the things that are fundamental to us understanding Christianity, and us having the authority we need. I think in the natural realm, sometimes we have to dig deeper to really know who we are. And so if that's therapy, if that is, really, really digging in who you are, generationally, where you come from. Keanu and I both did one of the DNA tests a couple years back. And it was so interesting to find out really the roots of who I am and where I came from. And it heightened my love for who I am and who I've been born to be just by finding that out. And that's something that most families don't know. So I feel like it's very important, in order to walk in the light that God has called you to walk in, you must know who you are. And unfortunately, many of us don't get that as children. We're too busy just trying to navigate becoming teenagers and then becoming adults. So to be successful, I think that there's a spiritual piece, but I also think that there's a natural piece. And when you really begin to dig into who you are, what makes you tick, what drives you, why you aren't driven by the things that you need to be driven by, therapy can help with that, or just taking time in whatever platform or however you need to find out who you are and being confident in that very thing. Then you can be confident in that very scripture that says, he who hath begun a good work in you will continue it until the day of Jesus Christ. So I just think that there are several things. It's your faith and being firm in what you believe and walking in it and believing in it and trusting in it. But then I think that there's a natural piece as well that goes along to that, so that we can create a whole being.
Thank you, Jawana. And as we end this segment, I will truly say that I'm so grateful to God that He has given you the gift of knowledge and the gift of wisdom. Because in this hour that we live in now, with life's uncertainties and the perilous times that the Bible speaks of that's coming in the last days, when we see peril all around us, we know that perilous times apparently are already here. And I thank God for the wisdom and the knowledge that He has endowed you with to lead ministry in such a time as this. So, my very last question as we wrap this up to you today, and again, thank you so much for opening up and being transparent with us today. But what has been the most fulfilling aspect of leading a ministry, and how do you envision its future impact on others? And how does it align with your personal story of beating the odds? You can just wrap that up as simple as you can.
The most fulfilling aspect is working with young people, especially, and being able to visibly see them being transformed into the likeness and the image of Christ. Because holiness is indeed a heart condition. It has nothing to do with what you've done. It has nothing to do with how you look. It is what's on the inside. Because what's on the inside shines brightly for what comes on the outside. And so, in having this conversation quite frequently, I'm not into numbers as a leader. I'm into actually seeing that the numbers who are under your tutelage are being transformed. And we work with young people who you can visibly see the change. And that is the most rewarding fact of everything we do. Vision wise, if I look at what I can envision as a leader, I envision having an unusually astute in Christ group of young people taking the reins and taking our ministry to the next level. We have young people who are so diligent in Bible study. We have young people who teach Bible study, young people who teach Sunday school. We have young people who are in the forefront of Sunday services. And that's so meaningful. One of the most impactful things that's going on right now is we're in a season of prayer. And the house is full of young people. You know, when we were growing up, we never saw young people in prayer. It was always the 40, 50-year olds and up. But that's not at our church. And so, in saying that, just to see that type of transformation, they're not impressing anybody to be out at 5 a.m. and at midnight at prayer. They're searching for more of God and finding out who they are, and they can find out who they are in God, in the natural, by finding out who they are in God. So that's the most fulfilling and impactful part of the assignment that I'm currently on, and that's in church and in the initiatives that I've been called to do outside of the ministry. And I just envision continuing to empower. And as I have the ability to use what God has given me, my God given abilities to empower, then I expect for the empowered to then begin to empower.
Thank you for that. And at our ministry, we are now in the level of ministry of renewal and revision and revitalization and doing the things that will impact a nation and a people in this hour. So, thank you so much for this talk that we have had today, and we look forward to the next.
Yes. And don't forget, our story, your future.